Hi, my name is Dr. Rebecca Borup. I am a professor at Mount San Antonio Community College. This is the first of many video lectures that I will be recording for my human physiology class. These video lectures are designed to accompany some other material that I will be providing for you for remote learning. It's fall semester 2020. Let's go ahead and dive right in. I want to begin with talking about some common characteristics of life. Now, many of you have had biology, and so you would have been introduced to these characteristics. Okay. Cells, all living organisms, from the most simple single-celled organisms such as a bacteria to the most complicated and large multicellular organisms such as the blue whale. Every living organism on this planet has cells. All cells are enclosed in a plasma membrane. They all contain DNA, RNA, proteins, and enzymes. Only some of them, let's actually switch to a different color so that I can emphasize this, only some of them contain organelles, in particular eukaryotes. Cells are roughly speaking, and you probably remember this from your biology class, cells are roughly speaking divided into prokaryotes. I don't know why I said roughly speaking. There's nothing rough about this. They're either prokaryotes or they're eukaryotes. Prokaryotes are smaller. These are your bacteria, your algae, your kingdom archaea, and you would have seen these and talked about these in your biology class. Eukaryotes are larger, much more complicated cells. Prokaryotes do not have organelles. They're simply a plasma membrane, and inside that plasma membrane is the cytosol containing all of the proteins and enzymes and DNA. It's just there in the cytosol in the soup. Whereas organelles and eukaryotes are designed to group things together into functional units, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next characteristic. I want to make sure you see this as well, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight that in green. Only some of the cells have cell walls. Human cells, human eukaryotic cells, do not have cell walls. Okay? We don't, not at all. This is critical to remember and to understand, because when we actually look at our immune system and how the immune system functions, and we'll spend an entire 2 lectures on this. Okay. The job of the immune system is to distinguish foreign cells from self cells. And what they do is oh heaven's sakes, what did I do? What they do is they look for things that are different. And well, one of those different things are these cell walls. Things with a cell wall are quite frequently attacked by our immune system. It's good that we don't have cell walls, otherwise we could become a target for our own immune system. The next characteristic I want to talk about is organization. Life is organized. That's one of the ways you can distinguish between whether something is living and not. It's not, of course, the only way, but it is an important way. Everything is complex and arranged in a non-random fashion. I mentioned organelles and how organelles group things together. This concept, or this idea of grouping things together into a functional set, is what we call compartmentation. The entire purpose of the organelles is for compartmentation. To give you just an example, the nucleus is an organelle wrapped up in a double membrane system layer. And inside the nucleus we have DNA, we have RNA, we have all of the proteins necessary to make messenger RNA, all of the proteins necessary to make more DNA replication. All of that's self-contained within the nucleus, separate from the cytosol, separate from other organelles. And they perform similar functions, related functions. And by grouping these things together, we maximize the efficiency as well as to protect the cells. Another example of the importance of compartmentation is the lysosome. If you look at this organelle, the lysosome, its job is to destroy things. It contains inside a plasma membrane, not the plasma membrane, not the cell membrane, but a plasma membrane, a phospholipid membrane. Contains inside it destructive enzymes and acids. And they're wrapped up in this phospholipid layer, which protects the rest of the organelles in the cell from the destructive enzymes within the lysosome. And we use that lysosome then for digestion of old organelles and so forth. And we'll go through that mechanism of how a lysosome is used when we talk about phagocytosis. All organisms can respond. They are responsive to their environment, primarily through the detection of stimuli that is present either in their external or their internal environments. We'll spend a lot of time discussing this. This is actually one of the reasons why I introduced these characteristics, is these are going to be common themes that we will discuss throughout our course as we talk about how the human body functions. Let me pick a different color because this is so very, very important. We're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about homeostasis. And in fact, this particular characteristic of life is so important that you're going to see this as an underlying theme throughout each of the organ systems that we are going to cover. For the most part, everything about how we work, how we function, how we the chemical reactions that take place in our body can really be looked at through the lens of homeostasis. And I will kind of harp on that. It'll be such an important concept that you're going to hear me talk about homeostasis over and over and over again. And in fact, I hope that we will reach a point where anytime you're presented with a problem that you don't have an answer to in human physiology, a physiology-related problem, that the very first thing you think about is, what do we need to do to maintain homeostasis? What is homeostasis? It's a relatively stable internal environment. Homeostasis does not prevent that environment from changing, but it does compensate for that change in the environment to restore this stable internal value. Growth and development, certainly important for each organism, and that includes the single-celled organisms. Bacteria, for example, will grow larger until eventually they reach a certain size, at which point they will go through fission and divide into two bacterial cells. We also have the same process occurring both within our cells as well as the whole organism. Individual cells grow larger when they reach a certain size, provided there are correct signals around that cell and adequate nutrients and adequate room. That cell will then divide through mitosis and produce 2 more cells. Organisms growing larger are, in a nutshell, all about cell division, mitosis. We actually have 2 types of cell division that we will discuss in detail. Mitosis is the cell division that produces 2 identical cells, versus meiosis, let me put that one down here, which becomes very important in reproduction, which is our next characteristic of life. Reproduction is 2 things. Most people, when they think about reproduction, they think about sex, they think about gametes, they think about the fusion of sperm and egg to make zygotes. And all of that is, in fact, part of reproduction. But mitosis can also be part of reproduction. In fact, mitosis is responsible for asexual reproduction. And human beings, our cells, do in fact go through asexual reproduction. Anytime we get an injury and we need to replace the injured cells, we're going to use asexual reproduction to do that. Anytime the bones in our growth plate, we're going to grow more bone, we're going to do that through asexual reproduction or mitosis. So that's important to understand and kind of wrap your mind around, is that we are constantly using asexual reproduction to produce more cells, and that is our mitosis. Okay. Now, sexual reproduction requires, this is the one you're mostly familiar with, is it's going to require, that's the one that requires the sperm and the egg. And so meiosis is the process of producing gametes. And then those gametes for sexual reproduction fuse. So we've got our little sperm and our egg, and that's going to fuse to produce a single-celled organism called the zygote. Correction, not an organism, single living cell called the zygote, and that zygote will divide to produce eventually a fetus and a child that will be born. Last but not least, we have metabolism. All living organisms perform chemical reactions, and in physiology, metabolism refers to the sum of all of those chemical reactions. The common usage of metabolism, which has to do with how many calories you burn, isn't the usage we will be using in this class. When I say metabolism, I'm referring to chemical processes of life. Okay. So all of those chemical reactions that occur in our body. Some of them require energy, and we can measure that energy in the form of calories. Some of them do not. Moving on, we're going to look at the common processes of life. Let me highlight this as well to distinguish between, there's a difference between characteristics and processes. Okay. All living organisms possess these characteristics, and all living organisms in one way or another are going to have to go through these different processes. Now, these processes look vastly different depending on whether we're looking at a multicellular organism or a singular cellular organism, how big the organism actually is, and so forth. Respiration, for example, in a bacterial cell does not require complicated lungs. It simply occurs by diffusion of gases into and out of the cell. Oxygen is used in cellular respiration, and oxygen is going to be required and important for any organism that is, correction, most organisms. There are some anaerobic bacteria that do just fine without oxygen, but most organisms require this oxygen for cellular respiration. Bacteria conduct the cellular respiration using their plasma membrane, whereas we use the organelle, the mitochondria. Because we are so large, we need to find a way of distributing that oxygen, of acquiring that oxygen, absorbing that oxygen, and distributing that oxygen. And that's where our respiratory system and, frankly, our circulatory system comes into play. So the respiratory system is about exchanging those gases, and the circulatory system would distribute those gases. Equal in importance to oxygen is carbon dioxide. During cellular respiration, we produce carbon dioxide, and we must remove that from our body, and once again, that's going to involve the respiratory system as well as the circulatory system. So the circulatory system picks up the carbon dioxide waste, carries it to the lungs, and the lungs expels it from our body. All organisms, all living organisms, use digestion, and again, single cellular organisms, that's really not super complicated. They absorb what we're going to call micronutrients, so they're going to absorb amino acids and glucose and fructose and lactose and small units, small chemicals through their plasma membrane, either through diffusion or facilitate it with the use of various proteins, actively pumped in through these transporters. We'll discuss all of those in detail. Humans, we like to think that we're really different, but we actually have very similar mechanisms for digestion. We digest macromolecules, proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and we convert them into micromolecules. And that's going to involve the churning of our stomach and our intestines, the gastric juices, the intestinal juices, the teeth that squish things up, the saliva that creates moisture, and all of those are mechanical processes that we need our entire digestive system for. But on a cellular level, we absorb these micronutrients very similar to the bacteria. So we have this tendency to think that we are different from single cellular organisms, but the reality is each and every individual cell within our body is a living structure, and those living structures happen to cooperate with other living structures nearby. And so we're going to, in this class, look at things both from a macroscopic level, things that we can see without a microscope, and then from a microscopic level, and we're going to talk about all the way down to individual proteins and individual molecules and how they interact in a chemical reaction to sustain life. Digestion, of course, would also be helpful. Let's kind of add to these layers with the circulatory system. We'll just kind of keep adding to it because it is so critical and important. We'll just kind of make it more and more yellow. That circulation is important for carrying the micronutrients that we absorb through digestion throughout the body. And then we have excretion, and that's going to be removing substances, in our case from the blood, to eliminate it and remove it from the body. It's going to be removed through waste products, will be removed through the feces, they'll be removed through the urine. And so we have the digestive system as part of excretion. We also have the renal system as being part of excretion as well.